some particular community or organizations or some particular groups, let's say in some particular regional context. So it is a type of qualitative research that involves, immersing oneself or yourself in a particular space to understand the details of some particular community. Therefore, ethnography can be briefly defined as the systematic study of people and culture. But academically, ethnography emerged from anthropology, and it was later adopted by sociologists. So the term ethnography in academic sense is defined as a process that lends itself to the study of the beliefs, social interactions, and behavior of small societies, involving participation and observations over a period of time, and the interpretations of the data collected from the field. Therefore, the goal of the ethnography was to give an analytical descriptions of other culture. So I have put this word other in within the inverted comma, and I will come to that point in the later part of the presentation. So the goal of the ethnography was to give an analytical descriptions of other culture and explorations of a particular phenomena rather than the testing of an hypothesis. So the overall, idea of ethnography is to systematically understand and study people, culture, and their everyday interactions with the environment. So all of you are getting this video presentations and my voice clearly, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So having said this, let me now move to tools and data that are used in the ethnographic research. So as many of you must be aware that ethnography is a methodology with different methods. Therefore, some of the major tools that are used to collect information from the field are observations, most particularly participant observations, and interview that helps to observe and analyze how people interact with each others and with their environment in order to understand their culture. So in the participant observations, you as the researchers observes the subject of research either by participating directly in their actions or as a member of the study population, or as a pure observer, in which case you do not participate in the actions but are still present on the scene. So there is one general rule in the ethnography. It says that use your eyes and ear more than your mouth. Which means like you have to use your eyes and ears more than your mouth. You don't really need to talk more, so you have to listen and observe the things very closely and try to understand and analyze the phenomenon from your observations. For instance, in my own research, I had a hard time to negotiate my role as a researcher when I first started my fieldwork in 2017. So in 2017, there was an intense movement for Gorkhaland going on in my region, in the Darjeeling Hills, and I could not initially reach to my field. So it was an important moment to observe, as it was a moment of history in making, but my role and my position was conflicting, because as being Gorkha or native of the region, the demand for Gorkhaland was central to my central to any Gorkha's heart. And as a researcher, I was, technically outside to the movement. So how I negotiated and maintained my position was crucial to, to my ethnographic research. And I will come to that point in the later part of the presentation. Now, let us just understand what kind of data will be expected from the ethnographic research. So basically, in my understanding and in my experience, the data which will be collected through ethnographic research are mostly unstructured account and analysis. It will be life histories, memories, myth, autobiographics, and many more. So it doesn't really have to be a concrete set of data, as called by some social scientists or even some natural scientists. They don't consider this kind of data as a data. So the data for them is a kind of a number. But in ethnographic research, it doesn't really have to be a number. It can be anything. It can be a structures account of any events or analysis of any event It can be a life histories of some particular person. It can be a memories. It can be a myth of communities and many more things. Because this kind of informations are very useful to chart out an alternative narratives, especially in a region or a context where region historical records are very scanty. So, we normally aims to collect this kind of data and try to, create some alternative narratives of understanding the history of the community. Okay, now let us understand how this ethnography emerged and became a methods of, social science. The term ethnography technically emerged from an ancient Greek words, ethnos and graphy. Which means the representations of people, cultures, and their society. But representations of whom and by whom is a very interesting question, and it's a very critical question as well. So as I said in the beginning, in the first slide, that I use the word other within the inverted comma, basically to denote how other or others' culture have been studied by the earlier ethnographer. So the ethnography basically developed in Europe during the end of the 19th century and early 20th centuries, who intended to study culture of other, who are considered as primitive, lower, savage society, unfamiliar culture, and uncivilized. So therefore, it was one of the most powerful tools used by the European colonizers or British colonizers, as well as researchers, to govern and colonize the subject and territories in many parts of its colony. So based on such ethnographic research and ethnographic, ethnographic explorations by the early colonial administrator and researchers, volumes of report, manuscripts, cultural account, etc., were prepared by colonial ethnographer, and this actually facilitated the colonizing process. To understand the native culture, their interactions, their everyday life, and this helped them to actually govern these people. Okay, so in a way, the ethnography also served as an important part of colonizations. Okay, this is the first seminal work by Brown Malinowski, in which he has, discussed about the aspect of doing ethnography, or the process of understanding the other culture by getting involved into the community's everyday life and interactions. And similarly, many other colonizers work, many other works like this kind of work, Tribe and Caste of Bengal by Albert Risley, and all this kind of work started emerging. And it really shaped the discourse of ethnography during the colonial times. So in the context of 1930s, in the decades of 1930s, the Chicago School of Ethnography advanced the field of ethnographic research in the North America. Similar to classical ethnographer, what I have discussed just now, the Chicago School researchers were also interested in understanding the other. However, the focus of research from the Chicago School was to examine the urban other, wherein classical ethnographers or anthropologists focused on colonial non-Europeans other. So, is there any questions or anything so far? If not, then I'll move to my next slides. And this is about understanding the perspective in ethnography. So broadly, there are two perspectives in ethnography, which is known as emic perspectives and etic perspectives. So this emic perspectives actually means to understand from the point of view of the natives of a specific cultures. This means that the researchers try to look at the culture on the study from the inside or insider perspective, through the meaning that the member of that culture live with. Therefore, ethnographers avoid imposing conceptual and theoretical frameworks on empirical data at the beginning of the research process. And I think this is very important because many of us often deal with this kind of issues of theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks. I mean, I understand that these are a kind of institutional protocol also, but when you really have to do an ethnographic work, you should not be preoccupied with conceptuals and theoretical framework, because that might distract you, or that might, hinder you from being an open-ended or open-minded. So one should be very careful about this conceptuals and theoretical frameworks while doing ethnography. And another perspective is ethic perspective, which means that the researchers look at the culture mostly with theoretical conceptions. So basically we, in social science, especially researchers working in their own community, their own society, and in their own place, they actually look from the insider perspective. And there are many debates of insider outsider in sociology or social science methodology, but these are ever-ending debates, and this have a very thin line of insiders and outsiders. So it depends on context also, and one need to really negotiate what is to be our insiders and what is to be our outsiders in doing ethnographic research. So I'll come to that point when I share my personal experience after this first part of presentation. Then we can have more discussion on that later also. Okay. Then what are the different forms of ethnographic research? So ethnography exists in many forms, and ethnographers continuously debate about what counts as ethnography and how to represent the field, because there are multiple definitions of ethnography. And as I said, every researchers have their own understanding of ethnography and analyzing the ethnographic data. So these debates are ever-ending and will continue to shape the discourse of ethnographic research in social science. But let us now see some of the most common forms of ethnography that have been widely used in academic research. One is known as the critical ethnography. So this critical ethnography actually, developed in contrast to conventional ethnography that aims to understand particular culture and society. So the critical ethnography also aims to understand the culture, but it works with the intentions to bring about changes in that society. Therefore, the central questions examined by critical ethnographer is what could be, whereas conventional ethnographers or classical ethnographers mainly examine what is. So here in this critical ethnography, the reflexivity to lay out the subjective opinion is highly referred. Critical ethnographers normally aims to bring out the opinions of their subjects and give voices to their subject to speak out, to reflect their and express their opinion. And another kind of ethnography is known as autoethnography. So here it's basically about the understanding the personal stories or experiences. And this existence of personal stories or experiences is essential in understanding oneself in the context of a culture by comparing personal experiences with others in the same domain. So here, storytelling as a method has been widely used. Many anthropologists still use this kind of storytelling as a method of understanding the community culture, history, and their everyday life. So storytelling is one of the popular methods in autoethnography. And another one is called visual ethnography. So this visual ethnography, photography has served as a major methods of data collections. So analysis of photographic content depends on a number of factors, including context, time, who is analyzing them, and when they are being analyzed. So this kind of using photography as a method of data collections became popular during 1920s when the camera was, was one of the most powerful toolkits to understand the society. But during 1980s, the use of videos became a vital source of data collections. And now, and recently, with the rise of new medias such as internet, social medias, the facilities of video calling, etc., the process of conducting ethnographic data has become relatively easy but with its own limitations. So this visual ethnography has become quite popular after this COVID things, and I think like this kind of workshops through video conferencing and all this thing is also, like a product of the COVID things only. So visual ethnography in a way is becoming slightly popular among ethnographers, and but it has its own limitations. So I will not go into its limitations. I'll go to the next, another forms of ethnography. Another form of ethnography is known as institutional ethnography. Basically, this institutional ethnography is nothing but, to understand the link between institutions and people experience. It's about the ethnography of the institutions and how people, their work and condition in which they live are affected or produced through the interactions between the institutions and people. This kind of approaches are basically followed in management studies and organizational studies. So I really don't have much experience about this institutional ethnography and other. However, there are two major other forms of ethnography which I have, used in my own research, and these are called multi-sided ethnography and walking ethnography. So in contrast to whatever we have, discussed about classical ethnographers, today the idea of field or the notions of field are not restricted to certain specific geographical locations. Rather, it is a diverse with complexity of multiple geographical locations. These days researchers doesn't really focus on one particular locations or let's say one particular community also. So in this context, multi-sided ethnography has helped us to understand such dynamics of the field and such dynamics of the research. This articles by George Marcos, Ethnography in and of the World System, the emergence of multi-sided ethnography. It's available online. It's one of the path-breaking work in understanding the multi-sided ethnography and its challenges and its criticisms. So I highly urge you to go through it if you really want to do the multi-sided ethnography. So this practice of pursuing ethnographic fieldwork in more than one geographical locations has, encouraged this multi-sided ethnography to advance in the academic domain. So the Marcos in this article, he argued that multi-sided ethnography is defined as its objective, the study of social phenomena that cannot be accounted for by focusing on a single site. Okay, having said this, I have also used the kind of multi-sided ethnography in my own research, because the kind of field which I try to understand in my PhD thesis was diverse and is kind of complex, topographical and geographical sites, and it's kind of helped me to understand the complexity and dynamics. And apart from this, there is another ethnography, types of ethnography, which is called the walking ethnography. This is not that popular among scholars, but I think it's kind of gaining some popularity. And this walking ethnography is nothing but is act of walking, during the course of field work and trying to understand the peoples when you walk across, So walking is a directed act. The process is open to opportunity for both attractive forces and distractions. So when you walk, it's not the movement of your body, it's also the movement of your mind. So when you walk, you get to see many opportunities, you get to understand many different dimensions of society, and you get to meet different kinds of person, or you get to interact with different kinds of person in the process of walking. And this really helps you to captures the dynamics of like the phenomena that you want to study in the society. So walking ethnography actually helps me in this context to capture the everyday interactions of human with their environments, and also the flows of ecology, objects, and values in society. So I kind of use these approaches to understand the everyday life in Darjeeling Himalayas, particularly in the context of forest villages and tea garden. So I'll come to that point later on, but now I think I'm almost toward the ends of my first part of my presentation. So if there is any, questions or any doubt, then please go ahead. I will, otherwise I'll move to my next part of the presentation. Anything? I cannot see anyone, so I cannot see myself also. So I'm just looking at the PPT and assuming that you guys are listening. Okay, so if there's nothing, then I'll move to the next slides, which is the criticism of ethnography. Okay, so the criticism, there are a number of criticisms, and every researchers have their own set of criticisms and own set of challenges, as I said, and they have their own set of experiences of doing ethnography. But largely, ethnographics that had developed in the initial stage in Europe and North America were criticized for being very male-centric approach, and it was highly criticized by many scholars. And in 1970s, in response to those criticisms, two important domains of ethnography emerged. One is known as feminist ethnography, and another is known as ethnography reflexivity. So this kind of development, of ethnography or development in ethnographic discourse have questioned the male-centric nature of traditional ethnographic research and examine the value or positions of women in society. So there is this one work, important work by called Women of Value, Men of Renown, published in 1976, and this kind of charted out the feminist discourse or reflective ethnographic discourse in understanding the ethnographic research. Nonetheless, today doing ethnography has become a new and innovative methodology for many researchers, especially in countries like India, where regional or context-based knowledge largely contribute to the development of social science. So ethnography, in a way, has become a very popular among social sciences. But there are numerous challenges, numerous criticisms, and numerous opportunity also. So I will now move to my next presentations on my own experience of doing ethnographic research, from where I began my field work and how did I negotiate, and I think you can also reflect on your own areas and try to see the connections and have interactions in the later sessions. Okay. In this part, I would like to begin from my PhD research areas and how I had to negotiate multiple challenges right from the beginning of my PhD days. Initially, when I started my PhD, I decided to work on the issues of ethnic movement, political violence, and civil society. The first 2 years of my PhD journey was on this aspect, on ethnic violence and all political violence and all these things. And most of my literature reviews were largely focused on this line of ethnicity, nationalisms, and regional identity politics. So as I said, in 2017, when I decided to go to my field for the first phase of my field work, that was in the month of August, I had to rethink about my field. So during that time, in 2017, the Gorkhaland movement was at peak in the Darjeeling region, and the region was under complete lockdown. So I couldn't able to go, but my leave for 3 months were already granted. And this is another stories of getting leave, from the institutions. And I think we can have another session on that, actually. So, but 3 months were already granted for me. So it was, another technical issue to reschedule the leave. But I'm lucky enough to get the things done smoothly. So after that, I went to the field in October 2017, and it was right after the movement, and nobody really wanted to talk about the issues or talk about the movement, which ended in failure, actually. So I spent my 3 months leave only by struggling to find someone to talk and share their experiences. But to my disappointed, I found no such persons to discuss, discuss with me about the movement, their experiences, or their, whatever everyday interactions with the movement. But this was such a movement where I get to, but there was one such movement, where I get to meet one activist. And it is this movement, this moment that changed the entire discourse of my PhD topics, or let's say PhD journey. So I met one activist, and I had a conversations with him. And after having a conversations with him, and after getting his insights, my kind of PhD things completely subject to another domains. So henceforth, I decided to work on the issues of environmentalism, or environmental issues in the Himalayas. And if anyone is interested here, what made me to seek my interest, we can talk about it later. But by then, my 3 months of leave was already almost over, and I had to return to the campus. And this is also like coming to the campus as a new PhD student with new topics, So it was really hard. I had to completely change my literature review, had to get new articles, new books, new source of information, blah, blah, blah. So there was this another set of doing PhD, I was starting my PhD after 3 years of my PhD. But after a few months, I decided again to go to the field. And there is another challenges of getting leave, especially in institutions like IITs, where leave is a highly centralized system. It is really difficult to get leave as you desire. But I somehow managed to get, and I visited the field. And this time I visited some of the forest villages, national park, and tea gardens in Darjeeling Hills. So this entire period, I was actually negotiating with the delay and negotiating with my own research topic, research areas, the kind of people that I wanted to meet, the kind of locations that I wanted to visit, and all these things. So even by then, when I was in the field, after in the second round, I was still struggling to find, the suitable locations or geographical locations or sites to start my research project. So I finally decided to do my fieldwork from the forest villages in Darjeeling Hills, but it has its own management issues, which I was never aware of. So I'll go to that point. So in a way, to study environment or study environmental aspect is a highly bureaucratic subject, and one needs to deal with several rules and regulations. So firstly, when I wanted to do, research in the forest areas, especially forest areas and national park, I was asked to get permissions from the PCCF, Principal Chief Secretary, Conservators of Forest, which was really a painful job for me. But somehow I managed to get it. So to cut the story short, it took me almost 1 year to get the permissions later, and to start my fieldwork. So you can imagine the kind of delay process that was undergoing in my PhD journey. So finally, after getting the permissions, I started traveling in several forest villages in and around Darjeeling Hills. So usually the forest areas are very poorly connected, both in terms of road and network. And just to meet one person, I had to travel to almost the entire day. So here I would like to say that methods like walking ethnography has really helped me, to understand the things in the process of traveling. So it's really helped me to understand, the dynamic, the shift, and everyday interactions in the forest villages when I walk across the forest villages. Even though I hardly get any persons to meet, so this was really an enriching experience to walk along. Also, and another challenges was that also many persons whom I meet had a very hostile relationship with the authorities. They were always critical of the authorities. They was always critical of the stories of the state or the regional authorities or even the forest authorities. So to deal with such kind of criticism and not letting oneself getting influenced by this kind of criticism was another difficult tasks in ethnography. So you need to hear those criticism, but you don't really need to get influenced by such criticism. So there are many other challenges like that, in doing ethnographic research. One need to really negotiate this kind of challenges, challenges in doing challenges, especially when you are understanding or you are trying to understand the environmental issues in the Himalayas. So, okay, so I'll now move to my next slides, which is on red tapeism and the issues of ethics on environmental research. Okay, so when I was doing my field work in the Sangay National Park, it is a transboundary geographical areas which has open borders between India and Nepal, and the borders are open but have certain rules and regulations which are not that explicit and not that rigid, but it do have certain rules and regulations. So I had to, in a way, negotiate with multiple rules and regulation. Although the border is open, it is open border policy, and there is no any hard rule exist. But in terms of environment, natures, and wildlife, we need to look into multiple rules and regulations, because these two countries, like Nepal and India, have their own respective laws, and have their own respective laws about forest, about national park, and all these things. And also, the concept of wildlife and nature has no boundaries. So how do we understand this, existence of multiple rules and regulations to, in one particular region? And then this Sangay has been an important, center of wildlife conservation, especially the red panda conservation in the eastern Himalayas. And each India and Nepal, it has its own, laws to protect the species, and some of the NGOs and organizations are also working on it. So negotiating all these issues, and cross boundaries issues has been a highly challenging task while doing ethnography in the highland of Sangay National Park. But it was also a very, interesting experience and very enriching experience, because the Sangay is one of the highest peak in the West Bengal, and you really need to hike, up hills to reach to that place. And walking along with the tourists, walking along with the common people, walking along with the forest authority has been a very, very interesting experience. And this is how you need to, the walking ethnography really helps you to understand the dynamics of this kind of, ecological understanding in the transboundary region. So this was my experience, and if you would like to, know more about it, we can have in the interaction sessions. So I will now, I think we still have a lot of times, but I don't think I have much to present. So I'll just take 10 more minutes to present, then we can open the floor for discussion and interaction. So the issues of ethics are really important in research, because the issue of ethics defines, what kind of research you are doing. So there are many ethical issues. And ethical procedures are integral to all aspects of an ethnographic research, and one need to take, this kind of ethical issues seriously. Ethical issue does not really mean consent forms or, institutional ethical issue, but it also means, that you are protecting the privacy and confidentiality of informants, and also the identity of your subjects and participants needs to be fully protected. And to have these ethical issues and to negotiate the ethical issues, you need to develop trust among community, which is another important, dimensions of ethnographic research, because many times, when you go to the field, you are often, assumed or suspected as someone's, working for some organizations or some companies. Then in that context, how do you, develop a trust among community, or how do you, on the respect and faith is another ethical issues in ethnographic research, and it's all depends and vary from context to context in what kind of community you are looking into, what kind of topics you are understanding, and what kind of issues you wanted to look, and what kind of information you wanted to gather from the community. So it all depends on that. But developing trust, I think, I personally think that development trust is one of the important aspects of ethnographic research, because without that, you cannot get desirable information as you want. Okay, but ethics is a thin line, many of us know that ethical issue is a thin line in research, because many times you have to negotiate ethics in a way that that helps you to gather information, but without hurting, or without hurting the sentiments of the community. So how do you negotiate that? Ethics has become one of the another challenges in ethnographic research, and there are number of studies on this ethical issues of ethnography. So I would urge you to go and read about it, and you will have a better understanding of how to negotiate the ethics in the context of ethnographic research. So negotiating ethics, how much information can be included in final research texts that are publicly accessible is another question, because ethnographic data are normally or usually does not consider as a scientific or valid data. So how do you make your findings, or how do you publish a finding in scientific journals? I think that should be one of the objectives of this workshop, but fortunately, I'm not that eligible, or I'm not that expert to talk about it. But like ethnographic data are needs to be when you transcript your ethnographic data, or when you write your ethnographic narratives, it really needs to be backed up by several archival sources, several literature sources, and make it a scientific one. That's how I used to do. And what is ethical is also a political question. Yeah. So to what extent will the exposures put their participant identity in jeopardy, particularly when conducting ethnographic research on the sensitive topics? So this is a question. Sometimes you will be confronted with many institutional laws, regulations, or bureaucratic laws and regulations, because you are working on a sensitive issue. So obviously you will have to deal with this. So how do you, protect the identity of your subject, or how do you, how much, to what extent you will protect, and to what extent you will use the identity of your participant is another interesting challenges, which everyone will not have the opportunity to go through. But obviously, if you are doing ethnographic research in sensitive areas, then you need to keep these things in mind, because ethical is also a political question, and it's a thin boundary. I mean, ethical is a thin line in scientific knowledge productions. Okay, so having said this, I think like many of you are getting what I'm saying. If not, then please stop me, and you can ask me here only. Okay, so having said this, I would like to highlight on certain ethical guidelines for ethnographic research, which has been published by American Anthropological Associations, and it's available online, so you can have access to it to have this whole set of articles on ethical issues. But I've just picked up a few points to highlight, what really an ethical issues and how to be aware of it. So first issues which I have discussed already is do not harm. Among the most serious harm that anthropologists should seek to avoid are harm to dignity and to bodily and material well-being, especially when research is conducted among vulnerable populations. So when you are working on, working on sensitive topics among marginalized community or so-called vulnerable populations, you need to be really cautious of your role, of your positions as being researchers, as well as being, their guidance, their friends, and their whatever. Because I suggest you to read one of the book on Narmada Valley. So there, the author has described how, how community expect from you, when you go to do ethnographic research among community, because there is a reciprocal relationship also, because it's not always you who wanted to take, because community also want to learn or takes many things from you when you are there in the field. So this kind of questions, this kind of positions will always emerge, but always be aware that you shouldn't harm to anybody's dignities or anybody's identity, or even to the material and bodily well-being. So these are also an ethical issue one should keep in mind. And another is be open and honest regarding your work. So you should make your status as a researcher clear to all those involved during the process. Like you have to be clear clear with your intentions, and you have to make them clear your intentions, why you are there and why you want to study them. So you should make this clear, and this can be difficult as particularly as participant float in and out of environment, and ideas and interest changes as the project progress. As I said in my case, that my research areas constantly shifted, or my research topic constantly shifted, and I had this very troubling mind, conflicting mind. But like you should be open and honest regarding your work, and you should always discuss your work, not just with the community or whoever you are studying, but also with many experts and your colleagues. That's really help you to chart out your role as a researcher, and it's kind of give you a space to think of yourself as a researcher working on the sensitive issues or vulnerable populations. And the third one is about obtained informed consent and necessary permission. So as I said earlier, that consent is also part of the ethical issues. So consent should be ongoing and negotiated, meaning that the participant is kept aware of any major project developments which affect their involvement in the study. So observations, example, the writing of field notes in fully public spaces does not require consent. Yeah, but what you are writing and to whom you are writing, does need some kind of consent, even though it doesn't necessarily have to be a written consent or whatever kind of legal consent. But yeah, you need to have this kind of psychological consent also within yourself, that when you are writing about your community or about your subjects, then you need to really protect their identities. You should not harm them in any ways. And fourth one is about protect and preserve your record. You are responsible for keeping your data safe and confidential, and for informing your participant about where and for how long your data will be stored. This information forms part of the participant information sheets. Yeah, but in this case, I would like to tell you that protect and preserve your data does not really mean that you have to hide your data. You should be always discussing your data with your colleagues, or with your fellow researchers, or with your experts, with your supervisor, because that helps you to understand the natures of data that you are collecting from the field. So when it's a confidential, does not really means to keep it to hide it from other or like that, but you have to keep it safe, so that it should not be misused by someone else. And okay, I'll now move on to the fifth point. It's about maintain respectful and ethical professional relationship. So there is an ethical dimensions to all professional relationship, and it's applied to almost all of us working in the institutions. Whether working in academic or applied setting, anthropologists have a responsibility to maintain respectful relationship with others. So it is important to keep evaluating your own research method and ethical practices to address situation which seems unclear or difficult. So in a way, ethics, is a very contested areas, and is also a very politicized and thin line. So you need to be really cautious and aware about negotiating your ethical issues. And every researchers have their own respective ethical issues. Every field have their own respective ethical issues, and one needs to really learn about how to negotiate with that. Okay, having said this, so I'm almost towards the end of my presentations. So it took me almost an hour. I wanted to talk something about writing also, but I really didn't get the time to prepare for it. So I really apologize for it. But writing ethnographic data is another important aspect, of doing research, ethnographic research. especially in today's context, when you have all these things online and all this virtual world and all the introductions of virtual world, COVID things and all these things. So I would just quickly discuss some of the challenges that I personally faced during the course of my PhD writing, and also, my own experience of writing now also. There is these issues when you are in the field, and when your field is your home and your home is your field, meanings that when you are studying your own community from your own locations, then you always have these issues of, or you always have these challenges of establishing your positions or your role as a researchers in your own areas. So these issues I always faced when I went for the field work, because my home is in Darjeeling and I was working, and my field work was also in Darjeeling, and then we had the same community, we had the same language, we have a similar geographical area, so everything was similar, and I was technically a part of it. But as a researchers, I need to maintain that balance of being, researchers as well as someone who belongs to it. So, writing about the field was always a challenge for me, because I always used to have this kind of bias about my areas, about my place, and then I always used to make that mistake of, overlooking many facts while writing about my places, my community. It was really hard for me to be critical of the situations, especially when it comes to the moment like Gorkhaland agitation and all those things, because that was very central to our heart. And then writing about those issues critically was a very challenging task. And there was this issues when I was almost towards the end of my fieldwork, and this COVID-19 lockdown started, and then everyone knows that we were, shifted from the campus to the home, and this was another challenges of writing or doing research, academic research from the home. So the COVID-19 actually leads to the virtual world, introductions of the virtual world. So this kind of thesis writing, kind of negotiating with the supervisors, submitting your report, making presentations, giving progress seminar and all this thing was very challenging. But it was a kind of opportunity also, because of this virtual world only we are able to have the sessions like this. So but for me personally, it was very challenging, because I was technically not that sound to handle all those things. So, and then like psychologically also, you are at home, and then there was a COVID lockdown, and you have to write a thesis. So this all put a new challenges. And then when your field is your when your home is your field, then it was another challenges, because you wanted to, when you are near to the field, you wanted to go to the field, but because of the lockdown and all these things, you cannot go to the field. So this kind of, anxiety was always there. And another challenges while writing ethnographic research for me was that finding academic spaces outside the campus was really difficult, not just for me, but for everyone I know. So when you are in your home and you wanted to write something about your field, and as I said, when your home is your field, so it was really challenging for me to think critically about that areas or about that places. So then my ethnographic data in a way become not that critical. So I have to negotiate and think about, I have to negotiate and find a new space to think, how to interpret my ethnographic data as in a very critical way, so that I can be able to give justice to the ethnographic, or able to give a justice to academic research writing. But it was a new challenges and new opportunities, because the online world has given many opportunities while writing. So it has its own limitations of journal access and all those things. but it kind of gave me a new exposures and new opportunity to find, new methods of doing ethnographic research. So I was able to connect. I was able to connect with my informant or with my participant, virtually, and I asked him to send me photos of whatever is happening there, and I had a video call with some of the people. So that's kind of helped me to negotiate my field from my home. And yeah, obviously that gender differentiation, class issues, and privileges of knowledge societies are always there when you are doing your research among your own community and in your own place. So this issues of gender differentiation, class issues, and privileges of access to knowledge is always there. But writing about the field from the field was another interesting experience for me personally, and it really helped me to understand my own field beyond my personal narratives of home. So it was kind of new challenges as well as opportunity. So with this, I think I will end my presentation here. We can have conversations if anyone have any questions or doubt. Thank you so much.
If anybody has any questions, they can just unmute themselves and go ahead and ask the question.
Videos, and also please introduce yourself so that we can know each other better. You can ask anything, like anything from my research, from your own research, or from your own experience, because this is a part of learning process, and we are also kind of learning now, so we can learn from each other.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Ripunjay Nath from Northeastern Hill University, Shillong.
Okay, so can you please turn on your video if possible?
Yeah. Actually, I'm in the department right now.
Okay.
So I want to ask that how can a researcher tackle the preconceived biasness while doing a research about a community, certain community or something?
Yeah. Thank you for this questions. This is very important questions, because we always have this preconceived notions about our people, our places. When you are studying a certain community, so I really don't know how to deal with it technically, but contextually you have to negotiate it in various way. In my case, I always, as I told, that I was born and brought up in that areas, where I wanted to do research. So I had this preconceived notions of my family, my people, my areas being great, my areas or my community being, always good. So to think them critically was another challenges. But you as a researcher really need to look at from different dimensions, and then try to see your own relationship with your own community from different perspective. So when you do that, it's kind of give you a space to think differently. So next time when you interact with any community in the course of research, you try to talk to them as if you don't know them, or you don't know anything about them. So that's kind of give you reflections about who you are and what kind of things you are overlooking in the process of your understanding your own community.
Okay,
thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the participants online?
Maybe we can have from the department students who are there, present there. I'm not able to recognize, many of you, but I think like if you have any questions, please go ahead. We can have conversations.
Hello.
Hi. Hello. Hi.
So my name is Riya Tamang, and I'm from Darjeeling, and it was
Okay.
an honor listening to you, sir. And actually, my question was like something similar to what Mr. Nan, I guess, he asked, because Gorkhaland is certainly an issue which is really close to each and every heart of Gorkha. So yeah, so he asked that. So another question that I wanted to ask that is, I was really intrigued when you told me that when you told us that you went for your field work, and one person changed uh, the whole course of your research. So I was wondering what you asked him and what he answered you, that answer made you to just change the whole thing. I just wanted to know that. And
Thank
also,
you.
if you could please tell like which area you went in Darjeeling.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad that you asked me these questions. Thank you so much for the questions. Actually, yeah, I will start with with that particular moment that completely changed the discourse of my research or top research areas. And since you are from Darjeeling, so it's really easy for me to to answer these questions in a way that you will be able to understand. Okay, so I had interview this interactions with one of the activists who I don't want to disclose the name, but who really work on the issues of environments, and who really work on the issues of ethnic movement also. So he was kind of trying to link this narratives of movement and environment. Then after 2 hours or 1 hours of 1.5 hours of conversations, and we were about to depart, then his last statement was really intriguing for me, because he told me, we have been fighting for this Gorkhaland movement for centuries. We have been demanding the statehood for centuries, 100, I mean almost 100 years, but we haven't got anything. But have you ever realized what we have lost in the process? Then he told me. Then I was like, I couldn't answer that time. Then he told me that we have lost our environment, we have lost our natures, and we have lost our wildlife, and these are the areas that we need to think about, because this movement, ethnic movements, and all these things are political questions, but this nature's environment needs to be protected, to protect to protect our place and to protect our identity. So yeah, so this kind of narratives, actually encourage me to shift my agendas towards environmental issues, and I'm also trying to understand the environmental issues now. And to answer your second part of the question, I work mostly in the forest villages in Darjeeling Hills, and I visited. As I said, Singalila was one of the important sites for me, and I worked mostly on that particular region, on the Singalila, Mane Banjang, Batasia, Dotre, and all these places. I think you are familiar with. Thank you.
There is a person who's raising their hand. They can unmute themselves.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes, you're
Uh,
audible.
okay. So I'm Renalini Subba. I'm a PhD candidate in Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta.
Okay.
So my question is, I would want to know from your experience that when you are doing an ethnographic study, which is not necessarily following a hypothesis, when do that how do you know when to stop? Because field can be tempting and you can go on and on looking for more narratives. So my question is, how can you be sure that what you have collected, the narratives that you have collected, is good enough?
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting questions, because we often have this debates of having, hypothesis or not in social sciences. I personally doesn't really went towards hypothesis and all these things. I rather collected informations and try to build up my narratives and try to see how it connects to the larger questions. So as far as you said that how at what point of time you will be able to know that your data is sufficient enough, to argue or to support any kind of information or argument. So I think like when you start writing and when you have this kind of clear ideas about what you want to do, what is your research question, when you have your clear research questions, then you will be able to understand that what kind of data you need to collect from the field. And also the ethnographic narratives needs to be in constant engagement with the literatures, as I said, also from the archival sources, because ethnographic data alone cannot solve as a major data or major information. So how do you have a conversations between the available literatures, archival sources, and ethnographic data? When you started building up this kind of conversations, then you will automatically realize that you need a more data to support your arguments, or your data is not sufficient enough to to reach to that point. So I think in my case, I did that. I try to bring back history and contemporary conversations through my ethnographic data and archival sources, and try to see the connections between these two data and two sources of informations. And then it's kind of helped me to understand and also chart out the kind of chapterization that I want to do in the thesis. So one thing I would like to say is that when I have this, as I said, first 2 years of my PhD was on the completely different issues. And when I reached third years, it was on the environmental issues. Then when I have to do an environmental issue, I have no clues what I wanted to do. It was like reframing a new research questions, reframing a new proposal, reframing a new questions, objective methodology, and all those things. But when I went to the field, I did not chart out my chapterizations that I wanted to write. Rather, I went to the field, I collected the information, I bring back, I try to analyze that and try to see what kind of chapterization I can make, So that's the process that I did. So I don't know like at what point you feel that your data is sufficient, but I think like there need to be a constant dialogues between the field and your research. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Do we have any more questions? Hi, Sangay. This is Roshni.
Hello. Hi.
So, yeah, I enjoyed your talk very much. And what I was curious about is that as a male researcher, were there certain instances where you faced certain kind of advantages or disadvantages in the field? Because since last year, I have also been conducting field work, and I strongly felt that my identity as a female researcher have shaped my access to the field or to certain people, and as well as the nature of our conversations. So you have mentioned something on gender differentiation. So
Okay.
I was just more curious in knowing about what was your experience in the field as a male researcher?
Thank you, Rosni, for the questions. Yeah, there is this whole set of literatures on feminist ethnography. Yeah, obviously, the gender differentiations plays a major role, when you are doing ethnographic research. And being a male, always have been in a privileged positions to, access to many aspects of society. And I think we should always, acknowledge that of being as a male. So yeah, gender differentiations plays a major role. And as I said, that there is another literatures on feminist ethnography. So some of the advantage which I personally faced in the field work, and I often, highlight this in my own mind, is that being a male is always easy, to go to the field, because you don't really have to think, multiple times whether you wanted to go, whether that place is safe or not, or where do you want to stay, and all these things. Because these things, if you have a little bit of connections and little bit of, let's say connections, then you will obviously have this, advantage of being to the field. But as a female scholar, I think you know it better how difficult it is to get into the field. And in the process of writing also, I had experienced this, because when I was at the home, so home is always a space where gender differentiation plays out, right? So as I said, that I wrote my major part of my thesis from my home. So being a male in the home and doing academic research was always a privilege for me, because if I say I'm working, I'm studying, so nobody will stop me. But I do know that, being a woman in society have a different, within a home have a different set of problems. So yeah, this gender differentiations plays a big role in ethnographic research, and I think you really have to bring this up in your own research, and I hope you'll do that. Thank you, Rosni. We still have a lot of time, so anyone can share their research also if they want, or they can ask anything, questions related to this session.
I see a person raising their hand. Please unmute and ask the question. Ruchi.
Hope I am audible.
Yes, you are audible.
I am Ruchi from School of Education Studies, Dr. Ambedkar University, Delhi. Sir, I have two questions. One is, ethnography is a very engaging and long process, like we talk about entering the field, making rapport building, and so on. It would be helpful if you could also shed some light on leaving the field aspect of ethnographic research, wherein having such an in-depth bond with the research participants and what it does to the researcher herself is also absorbed, and it is not easy to abruptly stop meeting the participants or wrap up the fieldwork. How should one go about leaving the field with empathy and with respect towards their participants? And another one is regarding the ethnography as a method or methodology. Amid pandemic, when the actual access to educational institution is restricted, one could use additional sites, say social media platform or digital platform, as part of their ethnographic inquiry. And how, for what duration, and how can the questions related to reliability and research ethics be tackled? Thank you.
Okay, can you quickly repeat your first question? I didn't get it clearly. Leaving the field, or what did you say?
As a researcher, the process of leaving the field without hurting your participants' dignity or empathy, that aspect.
Okay, so if I get your questions correctly, then I will just quickly respond to it. As you said that ethnography is a very time-consuming methods. Yeah, it's correct that it's a very time-consuming methods, and as I told that it's really need a longer time when you are trying to understand some communities which are completely unknown to you. So you really need to learn the language. You really need to know their society, culture, and everything. So it's a time-consuming process, but we have this institutional barriers of getting leave and all these things. So I think doing a very traditional or classical ethnography at this stage of PhD is not really possible. So one need to always have this set of doing ethnographic in a different way. And I still don't get your questions about leaving the field without hurting someone's dignities or something. So maybe we can talk about it somewhere else later after, or you can contact me for that, because I really don't get the questions. I'm really sorry. Or you want to repeat the question again?
No, sir, it's fine. We have talked.
No, I'm really sorry because I did not get your questions properly. Maybe because of my technical issues or something.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. We can have this conversation somewhere else also. You can contact me in email also. So yeah, so we can have another questions, but please be a little bit clear and little bit, please try to open on your videos so that I can get your question more clearly.
Okay, sir.
Hi, Sangay. This is Saurabh.
Hello, hi.
Thanks for your talk. It was really nice, especially when I am in my fieldwork right now, in the phase. So, since the question about biasness raised about the research methods part, and you definitely mentioned about being an insider in your field. So I wanted this discussion to be taken up a bit further and to think about research methodology and think about anthropological research work that started during colonialism. It has been the criticism to that has been that no research work is actually absolutely rid of biases. Even anthropological work, which are observing from a distance or observing as an outsider, also has some form of biasness, which is influenced by our institution or my village that I grew up in, or the space that I grew up in, and the way my mind is shaped through the form of education I received or any other form of uh, upbringing that I went through. So no research is actually very neutral according to the criticism that the anthropological works have received, and criticism from decolonial research works, research methods, and indigenous research methods have also taken up this issue. So the question of biasness when someone is from the inside, especially in cases of indigenous research and all, come up, and not the other way around. So because I think that being an insider also has certain advantages and certain forms of pre-existing knowledge, and which gives you certain form of ability to understand the issue that you're dealing with more details. And so how do you deal with these forms of issue that is raised about indigenous researchers being biased or insider researchers being biased and not the other way around? That is one question, and if I have time, I'll ask another question.
No, you go ahead. Yeah, we can take together.
Okay, the other one is also I'll continue with the previous person who asked the question about, I think she was asking how do you finish your ethnographic work and then leave the field, and then you sort of lose connection. That's what I think that's what she was trying to ask. So like, how do you stop that, like stop your field work and break that connection without like breaking someone's trust or other things? So that only I will continue with that and say that, do you really have to stop? Because most of the time our research works becomes a form of knowledge extraction from the fields, and we have many problems in the field. You and I have a very similar field, areas, and I understand your position when you talked about the difficulties in accessing your field, as I have faced similar issues. And so one of the most significant problem I faced was some areas being over-researched when there is a conflict happening, like displacement in conservation. These areas are studied by a lot of people from various orientations, from natural sciences to social sciences. And when you go to the field and then you are questioned that even if you write something which is beneficial to us, we don't ever come to know about what you have written. And so why should we help you with that? So so this form of agency has developed amongst people who have understood that research work is continued in this manner. So there are many new form of research methods which talks about giving back to the field and talking about social transformation that we should help in, and giving back to the field in even in the smallest way of at least talking about your work that you have prepared, which is ultimately from the knowledge that you gain from the people there. So how much should we normalize this giving back and not losing connection and helping towards some form of social transformation?
Thank you, Saurabh, for this set of questions and also for clarifying the previous questions. I really thank you for that. And I'll start with the issue of biasness in among indigenous research. In indigenous research. Yeah, the issue of biasness, value neutrality, and all these things have a long, debates in social science, and it will be ever-ending kind of debate because every kind of research come out with a new issues of insider outsider perspective and new issues of biasness and all these things. So if you go through my thesis, it's full of biasness. If somebody read it, then they will think that he has written from his own experience without doing fieldwork. One can also say that after reading because when you work with your own community and then when you try to understand your own community and issues in your own place, and you are trained to be biased because because you have always this preconceived notions of being something there. But I think it's also the process of learning how to be an unbiased. So I kind of try to be unbiased as much as I could. And then I try to see whether that served the knowledge of the community. And then there is this questions of obligations. When you are working your own community and own places, you always have this obligations of doing something for your community. They always expect you to do something. If not they, then you mentally and psychologically also you also have these obligations. Yeah, I wanted to do something because my region is a very underprivileged or marginalized in academia. So I wanted to contribute to something. So that's why I say that this dialogues between field and this review of literatures and archival sources should always be there, because otherwise your field data alone does not really serve the process of knowledge productions, because you need to set in the particular context where it can also be a technical or scientific knowledge. Your ethnographic data should also be a technical knowledge. And second question, do you really have to stop? I think I haven't stopped yet actually, because field is always there, and whenever I feel like going, then I think I should also go and visit and really expand. And when you are in the academic, you always wanted to expand your research further after PhD also. So we are really looking for it. But in the process of my PhD fieldwork, I was actually kind of forced to stop because the COVID came up, lockdown came up, and then there was this kind of institutional issues, many political issues, and also pressures to finish my PhD. So it's kind of external forces that push me to stop the fieldwork. But yeah, you should always have this notions in mind that the field is is always there in the heart. Or yeah. So and about trust and reciprocity. And these questions, actually, I really don't have much to answer for this, because as I said in the presentations, that every field has its own issues of trust and reciprocity. Because when you are working in your field, then if you are an outsiders, if you are an insiders, you have two different kind of reciprocity or trust. Because when I visited my my field sites, so I used to be treated as their own people because they don't expect much from me. But when somebody else or some outsiders visit the same areas, then they will be always asked, what do you want to study, or what have you done to our data? Kya ho gaya bhai, hum log ka wo kahan tak pahuncha? This kind of question is always there. So I think trust and reciprocity is important in ethnographic research, and it's contextual also. So you might face another set of issues and different from my experience, but you need to always develop a trust with the community, because then only you will be able to get your informations or desirable informations. So I think I answer your question, Saurabh, or else we can have a conversations later also, as we are always connected. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the participants?
This will, yeah. So, we take this occasion to formally thank Dr. Sangay Tamang for being there with us to lead this session, for leading this session. Next session will be by Dr. Ashish Kaka. As a continuation of what we did today, tomorrow's session, which starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and will go on till 12:30 or 1. First section of that will mostly deal with how writing ethnography. So today we were mostly dealing with doing ethnography, going in the field. Tomorrow, writing it, formulating it will be the core focus. Second part of it, all of you, including those who are part of it offline and online, will be made to write something. Comparatively longer exercise in that sense. The third part of that session will make us reflect upon the problems which we have faced over the writing. So these two sessions, in that sense, are merged together. We are extremely happy that you agreed, you will show up and you took this occasion to be with us. You are family. We don't need to formally do this, but however, this position makes me obliged to do this. So we thank once again. Thank you. We hope even in future you will be with us whenever we organize something of this sort. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So can I log out now?
Yes, everybody can log out. We'll end the meeting here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.